morning, everybody. It's Mark Gilbert here. I am happy to be back with you for another one of our Saturday morning Science of Mind conversation series. And, if you were watching the little intro video, it talks about the fact that every year we go through the Science of Mind textbook. And we did that earlier in the year. We usually started in January and moving through August, chapter by chapter, discussing it. And after that, at the end of the year and late months of the year, we often take resources from the Science of Mind archives, of which I'm the vice president and also one of the key researchers. And we take those Science of Mind resources and we look at different items of Ernest Holmes' work and other Science of Mind products and bring them to the program for discussion. I was happy to be with you about a month or so ago when we had a presentation on Time is a Timeless from Ernest Holmes' talk at Asilomar in the 1950s from the book that I helped compile about a year ago. And it was so well received, I thought I would look at another chapter this particular week. And so what we're going to be doing is going through the chapter on non-resistance, the talk that he did at Asilomar from August 12th, 1959. And we're going to get into that in just a moment. But I want to stress to you that this is an interactive program. And so if you're joining us live, I would love for you to drop your name and location into the chat field in whatever program you're using to view this. And if it pops up in my internal system here, then I'll bring those up from time to time and make sure that I get all of your comments and thoughts felt and shared onto the screen. And I see that we have Shay Davis. Good morning from Colorado. It's great to have you again, Shay. I appreciate you tuning in and being here for the program. And again, anyone coming in, please drop your name and info into the comment field so I can share who all is here on the live chat. Encourage those of you who jump in to be sure and also share your any questions and comments that you have as we go through this. As I mentioned a minute ago, what we're going to be looking at is the topic non-resistance. And I have some information that we're going to be sharing regarding non-resistance. And, the question that comes up for me when you hear that topic is, what does non-resistance, mean? What do we mean by the term non-resistance? There I'm showing you a cover of the Ernest Holmes book that I was mentioning a moment ago. This is the book from which the lecture I'm going to be taking some content from and discussing in a little while is presented. You can find this book on Amazon or order it through any of your major booksellers. You can find it for Kindle and you can find it in paperback. It's quite a thick paperback. It's just to hold it up for you. It has over 400 pages and lots and lots of the words of Ernest Holmes. There's a section in the middle with photos and such from the time that Ernest was at Asilomar, a whole photo album. And so it's a great, if you're a fan of Ernest Holmes, I would highly encourage you to pick up a copy of the book. There's some really, really deep stuff in it. I always give the caveat that if you're new to Science of Mind, it's not necessarily the best introduction to the Science of Mind, because you got to think of who came to summer conferences at a conference center on the coast of California in the 1950s to hear Ernest Holmes. They were people who were fans of Ernest Holmes, so they already knew a little bit about Science of Mind. So this was not where he gave introductory lectures. Obviously, the stuff does have introductory content in it, but it's mostly people who come in and attended a conference or people who are already steeped in a philosophy to a degree, and they come in and they want to go deeper with it. And so the Asilomar would fill up every year with some of the key speakers throughout the New Thought and Science of Mind movement. And Ernest Holmes being, of course, one of the key attractions to coming to it. He would walk around the grounds and talk with people and sign autographs and have discussions with them. And so, he was a minor celebrity, in the program. And it was an interesting time. And so, but his presentations were a little more advanced metaphysics. That's the point I wanted to make. And so from a standpoint of an introduction to Science of Mind, the book may not be the best intro, but it is a great volume if you already understand a little bit of the basic concepts. So that said, what I want to get into is looking at the topic of non-resistance. And so again, I'm inviting you that if you are here live, to share your name and location in the comment field. And I'd also like you to share your thoughts on what does non-resistance mean to you. What does non-resistance mean to you? So if you're watching live and you got some thoughts on what non-resistance means and how it's important to your spiritual journey, what does it mean to you in terms of your spiritual journey and spiritual path? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. So drop those comments in the comment field, and I'm going to pause in a few minutes and bring anything that's come up on that into the field. However, what I want to do is just jump in and share some thoughts of my own before I get into the works of Holmes regarding the topic of non-resistance. And so let me just mention that when I think of the term non-resistance, I immediately sort of link it with nonviolence, and there's two people who come to mind in terms of that field, and one of them is Gandhi. We think of Gandhi's nonviolent to non-resistance efforts within India to seek their independence in the early part of the 20th century. He's well known for his concepts of bringing nonviolent and non-resistance approaches to the political sphere. And so I think a lot of times when we are first think of the concept of non-resistance, that is something that is brought into our awareness. Got a couple of quotes on the slide that's on the screen that I picked from Gandhi that I thought would be appropriate for where we're going today. He says, "My religion is based on truth and nonviolence. Truth is my God. Truth is my God. Nonviolence is the means of realizing Him." And then he says, "Happiness." And although you think this quote may have nothing to do with non-resistance, but it really does. Happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. Okay. So many of us think of Gandhi as one person who was very much into non-resistance. And the other name that comes to mind, of course, is Martin Luther King Jr. And in the 1960s and the civil rights movement within the United States, of course, being a key leader for nonviolent change in our realm of how we treated people of color in this country. And I love this quote from King, so pulled out and wanted to share it with you as well. It says, "I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word." Now, I think both Gandhi and King were employing nonviolence from an aspect that involves more than one realm. They were looking not only at the world of form, this material world we live in, and seeing injustices in it, and seeing that when we push against something, we tend to get what we tend to grow what we resist. There's an old New Thought axiom that goes, "What you resist persists," and there's a lot of truth in that. What we push against, what we give our energy against, we tend to see it more and more. We see that a lot in our modern times right now, where we look out at, all of the political divisiveness, and it seems like the more political divisiveness we get, we are getting more of it. And the more we see divisiveness and the more we focus on divisiveness, the more we get of it. And so the idea is, how can we focus on the areas of what we want to grow in our life? This is just a key basic principle within Science of Mind, is to turn our attention away from the things that we don't want to manifest into our lives and turn our attention towards that which we wish to manifest. And so as long as we're pushing against things that we don't want, we're going to grow more of that in our lives. And so what non-resistance is calling us to do as a spiritual concept is really to move us in the direction of being something that is in alignment with what we really truly desire on the planet. And non-resistance means being in the flow, being in the anchored in truth as our spirit, and being in that anchored in that unconditional love that King is talking about there. So again, if you're just coming on the line, I encourage you to drop your name and location in the chat field, and we'll bring that up in a moment. And also, I would invite you to, if you've got a quick definition or thoughts on what does non-resistance mean to you, or either one you can answer, how's it important to your spiritual journey? I would love to hear from you, and drop those comments in the comment field on the program that you happen to be watching this live this morning. And I'll pause in just a moment and bring some of those comments in. Now, I said that King and Gandhi were the first two that came to mind for me. There was a third one that came to mind, and it might not have come to mind for a lot of you, but it was the topic of non-resistance made me think of this little book by Deepak Chopra. It's probably about 30 years old now. It's one of my favorite books by Chopra. It's called The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, and he outlined in that book, what he saw as 7 laws of success. But success is, material success, but spiritual success is really what it's about. It's really about anchoring ourselves in our spiritual truth and then allowing it to flow and manifest in our physical lives. And so he's outlining in that book 7 principles. And when I thought of non-resistance and was reading Ernest Holmes' talk in the book from Asilomar that we're covering today, I was immediately struck with some of the similarities with some of the stuff that Chopra was saying in the Spiritual Laws of Success book. And I'm just going to read you a couple of quick quotes from the chapter in the book on the law of least effort. The law of least effort is the law 4 in section 4 of the book. It starts with a quote from Lao Tzu from the Tao Te Ching. He says, "An integral being knows without going, sees without looking, and accomplishes without doing." And I know when I first read this book and was early on in my spiritual journey, I kind of thought, well, how do we, be somebody who accomplishes without doing? Because my whole life was, I had to keep my to-do list, and I was always going, doing. And to make that flip into being in the flow, which is what that's about, being in the flow of the Tao, flow of the way, flow of spirit, was really what they were talking about us doing. And there's nothing wrong with doing, I want to be clear, very clear, but there is a aspect of us that we have to sort of surrender to the flow of life and be in that flow. And that's what I think that the quotes from Gandhi was about happiness. Is we're truly happy when we're in that flow and just allowing things, to happen for us. But here's how Chopra writes about this 4th law. He says, "The 4th spiritual law of success is the law of least effort. The law is based on the fact that nature's intelligence functions with effortless ease and abandoned carefreeness. This is the principle of least action, of no resistance. This is therefore the principle of harmony and love. When we learn this lesson from nature, we easily fulfill our desires." What he's calling us to see is around us, everything just naturally flows. There's things that just happen, and things happen, but it's only in the human realm with our introduction of our thoughts and the ability to change things that we get out of that alignment of the flow, and we introduce our own thoughts and push against nature. And so he's calling us to let go of our pushing against stuff. I continue. He says, "If you observe nature at work, you'll see that least effort is expended. Grass doesn't try to grow, it just grows. Fish doesn't try to swim, they just swim. Flowers don't try to bloom, they bloom. Birds don't try to fly, they fly. This is their intrinsic nature. The earth doesn't try to spin on its own axis. It's the nature of the earth to spin with dizzying speed and to hurtle through space. It's the nature of babies to be in bliss. It's the nature of the sun to shine. It's the nature of stars to glitter and sparkle. It's the human nature to make our dreams manifest into physical form easily and effortlessly." We read that last sentence again. It's our human nature to make our dreams manifest into physical form easily and effortlessly. And that's what he's calling us to see and do. Again, if you're jumping on and watching, put your name and location in the comment field. And also, any thoughts you have on the question scrolling along the bottom of the screen about what does the term non-resistance mean to you, and how's it important to you, or how do you see it playing out on your spiritual journey? And we're eventually rolling towards a conversation that Ernest Holmes had at Asilomar one evening in 1959 on the topic of non-resistance. And this is just all setting up to thinking about the idea of non-resistance for a few minutes. Let me jump on to another quote from Chopra. And he says, "Least effort is expended when your actions are motivated by love, because nature's held together by the energy of love." And what is love? God is love. Spirit is love. Love comes from the spiritual realm and then manifests and pushes through us. It's an urge that pushes us along to grow and to evolve. And so love is an energetic force that's evolving us. And it's something we need. It's not just this emotional feeling that we have as humans. That's one aspect of it, but it's as Teilhard de Chardin said, love is an evolutionary force that's pushing us to our growth. When you seek power and control over other people, you waste energy. When you seek money or power for the sake of the ego, you spend energy chasing the illusion of happiness instead of enjoying happiness in the moment. When you seek money for personal gain only, you cut off the flow of energy to yourself and interfere with the expression of nature's intelligence. But when your actions are motivated by love, there's no waste of energy. When your actions are motivated by love, your energy multiplies and accumulates. And the surplus energy you gather and enjoy can be channeled to create anything that you want, included unlimited wealth. I want to pause there because what I want to do is bring up on the screen a graphic that I want to keep in your mind as we go through the rest of this quote I'm reading from Chopra and as we go through the words of Holmes in just a moment. And also to remind you to drop your thoughts into the chat field so that I can bring them up in just a few minutes. But what you see in the on the screen is a chart that I want to sort of picture as this little map in your mind for a moment as you listen to these words. Is we're spiritual beings who are having a human experience. So what our truth is, we're in the spiritual realm. That's who our truth is. But spirit created this manifest universe and this individualized expressions of you and I. We're all aspects of one. We're all aspects of spirit. We're these human, we're going through a human experience as individualized expressions of the one, but we're also anchored in the oneness. And so we live in multiple realms at once. We live in this physical realm, and it's so, engaging that it grabs our attention all the time because our senses are continuously bringing the energy of the world that's around us to us. And we tend to see things as separate and apart from one another. It's just the physical realm where we live in this multiplicity. But I want you to keep in mind that in our minds, which is that mental realm, and sort of floats between and overlaps or interspheres, as Holmes says, between the physical realm and the spiritual realm, is that our mental area is where is our realm of thoughts. And it grabs and it looks at physical life and makes thoughts and judgments. And our ego tells us stories about the physical realm in our lives in the physical world. But we also grab intuition and touch into the spiritual realm through intuitive knowingness and revelations in our lives that allows us to really know and anchor our truth. And so within us is this movement. The spirit embedded itself into its entire process. So that's the process. You see the arrows on the sides. Downward side is involution. Involution is just a big word that means spirit embedded itself into everything. And down in the physical realm, because we're these individual expressions, we tend to forget that we're one. But evolution is a process that's not only the physical evolution that we're taught in school, but evolution is the processes of us growing in our consciousness in the mental realm to remember the truth that we're all one. So involution embedded spirit and all of spirit's aspects and characteristics into us. And evolution is our process by which, through the human story and the spiritual journey, we're returning back to oneness. So when we're moving upwards towards the spiritual realm in our consciousness, this is what's often termed enlightenment. It's also tasting the transcendence, having those one taste experiences, etc. Going to the concept of big mind. There's so many words for it, but all of them, from a state of bliss and the experiences of the divine, are all us moving back into the spiritual realm. So what happens is we are in this continuous process of us choosing how do we look at life. Are we looking at our lives as separate and apart and individual things that are bumping against one another? Or are we our truth and love, which comes from the spiritual realm down into us? So when Gandhi was talking about spirit and truth, he was really talking about a spiritual aspect of our nature would eventually win out. When I think I said Gandhi, but I meant King. And when Gandhi was talking about happiness, he was talking about being in the flow. He was talking about being anchored in the flow of our spiritual truth and allowing it to flow. What happens is we tell all these stories about what's going on in life around us, like Chopra was just talking about, and we tend to say that it's the stuff out here that we're bumping into that's not what we want. And when we focus on that, we're focusing on the differences in the physical realm, and we create blockages. What we need to do is to introduce into our lives an idea of non-resistance, not resisting stuff. Now, when you first hear that, there's a lot of people who will say, oh, well, this person over here doesn't know what you're talking about, and they're doing things that are harmful to me. And we have to sit in that, interesting space where we look out at life and people who don't know their truth yet and have healthy boundaries against any misdeeds and misbehavior that they might be having. Actions that they're taking that might be harmful for us. We can sit in a space where we bless them and know that they just don't know their truth yet, but also have a healthy boundary that says I'm not going to let them harm me or do anything to my life that would take me out of the state of bliss that I want to be in that state of happiness or that state of flow. And so what we're trying to do in all of this is to move to not pushing against the people in the world who are different and seem to be causing harm, but to acknowledge them, having healthy boundaries, understanding where they are, sending them love, and then living in the life of where we find our own truth and oneness, not resisting life. Many times when we look at King and Gandhi, we tend to focus on the fact that they introduced us to a non-resistant means of political protest, and that's in the physical realm. But ultimately what they were doing was moving us to not resisting those powerful people who were in what we saw as power in the physical realm, causing harm and injustice in the physical realm, not to pushing against them, but to then anchor in our consciousness in the truth of the spiritual realm and allowing it to flow into our lives. So let me finish this one quote from Chopra, and then we'll take your comments. So be sure to drop anything about anything I'm saying here into the comment field, and I'm going to bring that up in a moment. Chopra says, you can think of your physical body as a device for controlling energy. It can generate, store, and expend energy. If you know how to generate, store, and expend energy in an efficient way, then you can create any amount of wealth. Attention to the ego consumes the greatest amount of energy. When your internal reference point is the ego, and that's your physical connection. When your internal reference point is your ego, when you seek power and control over other people or seek approval from others, you spend energy in a wasteful way. When that energy is freed up, it can be rechanneled and used to create anything that you want. When your internal reference point is your spirit, we read it again. When your internal reference point is your spirit, when you are immune to criticism and unfearful of any challenge, you can harness the power of love and use energy definitely for the experience of affluence and evolution. Okay, so, excuse me. What we're called to, and what Holmes is going to be calling us to in a moment here, is this push to shifting our attention into this spiritual mental realm and looking upward to spirit. Okay. Yeah. So what are your thoughts and questions? Let's see what we've got here. Can I please talk about how this relates to physical pain and how to apply it? Thank you. Yeah, that's a good question. Going back to we're physical beings, but we're spiritual beings having the human experience. And where's the physical pain? It's in the physical realm. And it's really hard to ignore and not resist the physical pain that's going on in you. And sometimes it can obviously become so overwhelming that it's hard to focus on your spiritual truth because you're so focused on this dis-ease in your body. I can relate to that. I don't know if you can tell. I've had a little bit of a challenge myself over the last week with a respiratory infection that I've been processing through my body, and so I can attest to times I can be very anchored into knowing that my body is allowing itself to reprocess, that the natural flows of this body are taking its forces, like we were reading within Chopra a moment ago, and allowing those natural flow of our body that knows what to do to take over, using the guidance and wisdom of doctors and medicines and other things that are we have found through the great findings of science to assist in the process. Yes, use medicine, but also use the natural flow of your body. And then how can we shift our attention and focus to our spiritual realm? What I've been trying to do over the last few days is to keep myself anchored in knowing that my body knows how to take care of this, and that the guidance and medicines that I've been given have been, divinely given to me to help me move through this, and that there's oftentimes a lesson for me in the process. that I am learning something by going through it. That sometimes there's a message to slow down. Maybe there's a message for what's going on in my life. Maybe there's a way, it's a call for me to reorient and ask myself, what do I really believe? And do I believe in the power of the divine to create that pattern of perfection that's in spirit to flow through my body? And if I do, what am I doing in my consciousness that is blocking that? And that's not to put myself in any kind of victimhood or anything that's saying that, oh, I've gotten off track or blame myself for creating a condition. That's a misuse of new thought tools to try to do anything like that. But it's a time to pause and recognize it's an opportunity for growth. It's an opportunity to reorient ourselves. And I know for myself, what I've done is done more treatment work this week. I've done more internal thinking about the perfection of my body and its natural forces, and giving myself a little mantra, like I've been going open and clear, in terms of my breathing flow. And finding positions to hold the body and do that chant in myself. And I found that it gives me relief. I find that it's helping me. And I really know that my body is moving through and releasing this aspect. So if I sit and struggle and push it, oh, woe is me. Look at this pain. Oh, I wish this was gone. Oh, when you're resisting it, and when you're just trying to move into being in the flow. And there's an axiom to this as well, Shay, that that sometimes gets mixed up in new thought, is that sometimes we think that physical perfection or getting through an illness, especially when somebody's in the end of life stage, is that's the desired outcome. Well, it may be the desired outcome on the human level, but on the spiritual level, sometimes there is a greater spiritual truth that needs to be called into, and that means sometimes releasing the physical body for somebody who's near to death. So I know there's, I know a lot of practitioners talk about the, how do you handle someone who is near to death and they're wanting to, cling to the body? There's a shift that occurs where you have to start recognizing and treating for the greatest and highest good, treating for what Spirit's calling is for this physical form at this time and its use of this physical body. And sometimes, especially in the end of life, it's a release of the form to the greater expression, so the person's spirit can move on into other realms and move forward in its next evolution. So there's this dance we sometimes do between trying to find where it's Spirit's truth for right now. And sometimes it's moving through the experience of that physical illness and gaining some gifts from it. So a lot of it is, and the short answer, I hope you're gathering this, is to reorient your thinking to what's spiritual's truth for what is happening in this physical pain, in this physical matter. And how can I move through this physical pain and use the natural healing tendencies that are within spirit in this physical form to bring about a release of the pain? And how can I use the gifts of modern medicine to apply that to further it along? I hope that's helpful to you. Abe from New Mexico and open to the flow of love and life. Abe, I'm glad you're here. I see we do have a few other people who have not joined in the conversation. I would invite you that if you got any thoughts and questions on the topic of non-resistance and anything I've covered, I think I'm 30 minutes through the program and I haven't even gotten into the Ernest Holmes material yet. So maybe I'm just a little bit behind today, but it's all good. So let me jump into, but I do want to encourage folks to drop your comments into the comment field, and I will periodically stop and come back on them. What I want to do now is get back into looking at Ernest Holmes at Asilomar. And he was talking to attendees on Wednesday, August 12th, 1959. And I want to start by just reading the introductory comment to this. He says, our subject tonight is really non-resistance. It is going along with life. Now, he sees life with a capital L from spirit. Spirit is life flowing through us. And so when he talks about it, it's going along with life. And because of the nature of the two previous talks he did that week, we don't know what will happen in the next hour. At least I don't. Technique without temperament is futile as temperament without a tongue. It's interesting. If we listen very deeply and particularly, together we'll develop in what India they call darshan,
which is something that happens between a speaker and an audience. Something goes from a speaker and the audience picks it up and it comes back here and it goes back and forms a triangle to each person in the audience. And unless it takes place, there's been no real communication with an audience. When there is an entering into a rapport, something happens that's beyond either the audience or the speaker. So with your indulgence, I'll change the subject tomorrow night and the next night because I see it might fit better with the way things seem to be formulating itself in our consciousness as we go on with these lessons. I wanted to share that quote, even though he just throws the word non-resistance out at the beginning, but he's recognizing that there is this, and I've seen this too in all the talks and classes that I've done, is there is an energetic flow that happens. There is a communication, sometimes nonverbal, non-silent, at the realm of spirit communication. You're doing a message on a Sunday or you're teaching a class and you're talking to someone, and there's an interchange, whether there's a verbal interchange, which is good, which is what I'm encouraging here, or there's a physical interchange. There is a connection that's manifest in any kind of conversation. And so what we're hoping to do with these conversation series is to create that through an online environment, that darshan talk, that our feeling that Holmes is talking about, the interconnectedness where we create a real communicative bond. I'm saying something that sparks something in you that you think about, that then anchors and anchors to something that you know from your own experience. And then you say, how does this apply to me? So you're taking the words you're hearing from me and you're interpreting them through your own lens. And then you're using them and employing them in your own way and how it might play out to be beneficial for your life. And if we're in a verbal interaction, you might give me something that could serve the same. Like the question that Shay asked a moment ago on health and stuff. I wasn't necessarily thinking about sharing my health journey over the last few days, but it is good to see that this area of non-resistance is something that I've been trying to work through over the last weeks. And maybe I was attracted to this topic for this presentation today, simply for a recognition that I needed to get into a state of non-resistance. So there's a growth for me that's occurring. This is a two-way street, whether it seems like, but the medium seems to be something where it's me talking to you. But it's okay. There's a two-way street going anyway. There's some long quotes I really wanted to share in this, but I'm going to try to get to the key gist of this. Here's something he thought that I just thought was beautiful. Early on in the talk, he says, we know we're living in a spiritual universe. It's a spiritual system. It's alive, awake, and aware, all over with equal intensity. So tomorrow night, I want to speak on the universe or infinite. It belongs in its entirety to each and every individualization of itself. Emerson said the universe remains to the heart unhurt. We do not believe there is an individual anything in the universe. If there were, it would be separated from the source of its being, which is universality. The universe cannot create infinite variations of individuals separate from itself. Because it's infinite and ever present, it can create innumerable individualizations of the entirety of itself in multiplicity, remaining in unity and without division. And that is the secret of the ages. And he is so correct about that. And when you read a lot of these words, sometimes when you're first introduced to him, you go, what the heck is he talking about? But what he's talking about is that aspect of that chart I have on the screen. And that is the nature that we're truly spiritual beings, but down in the physical realm, we're not individuals. He calls us individualizations. Why does he make that distinction? Because when we say individuals, it tends to say, I'm separate from you and you're separate from me. But when we use the word individualizations, he's recognizing that we're an expression of the one. We're not true individuals divided and apart from one another, but we're anchored in a unity. We're going through an experience of multiplicity, that this world where we experience the forms around us as unique and different and separate and apart, where we experience increments of time moving along, the separate moments of time. That's all an aspect of how we experience the physical realm. But anchored in the truth of who we really are, we're really the timeless. We're really the formless. We're really a oneness. There is a unity that is behind the multiplicity that anchors us into a degree of oneness. And that's the key secret of the ages, is to see the unity of all it is. And if you can really get that into your awareness, you are so further along on the spiritual journey. Um, Now, jumping ahead, he says he wants to talk about non-resistance. It's the only thing that cannot be resisted, and demonstrate that non-violence is the only thing that cannot be violated in the universe. And he starts to, I'm not going to read the entire quote because of time, but I want to say that in the talk, he talks a lot about the fact that there are psychological axioms that everybody agrees to, and that there is this, in the terms of the day, taken from Freud, there is this, we have this it or this id within us that is seeking to be expressed. And the expression is the libido. The libido was often taken to talk about sexual energy a lot, but it was really more in Freud's terms, and how Holmes interprets it, was to be a creative energy that is flowing through us, that we all have a creative energy that is pushing us, our it, that which is in us, that ineffable something which is spirit, to grow into what its fullest expressions are. And so Holmes says this, he calls it the divine urge. I've always loved that term. God, and if you're looking at the chart, involution, and I said earlier, God or spirit embedded itself into us, including the urge to evolve and to grow, and the urge to create and express ourselves. And that creative urge that exists in you, whether you're an artist, your urge is to be the best mother, the best store clerk, the best organized person, the best public speaker, whatever it is, you got an urge in you to express yourself and your talents. And it urges you to express. And when any of our urges get blocked, Holmes says that that energy, that flow of energy from spirit flowing through us back up to spirit, that evolutionary urge spirit, when it gets blocked, that we have the energy has to go someplace. And so it circles back around within us and it becomes a form of psychological repression. And so that a lot of the traumas and psychological illness is all, when you get to the core of what they are, they're unexpressed spiritual or psychological energy in us that's it's not getting expressed. So what he calls us to do is to see that the simple way of getting rid of these psychological repressions. Yes, it's helpful to understand them and hold them up, which is what psychotherapy's techniques are. Psychotherapy works from the concept of the mental realm, of bringing the story of the repression into your awareness so that you can see how it's impacting you and you can let it go. But what the ultimate spiritual technique is to understand and to manifest and to see the oneness of all of life and to recognize that you have unexpressed repressive energy. And he says it's as simple as this, but no one believes it's as simple because we want everything to be hard. And he goes on to say, we believe this first and of all in an up push from the universe that we call involution, which every Bible teaches. It's a necessary conclusion that the passing of spirit into its own form, into its own image, containing its own measure and all of it, and then the evolving or unfolding of that thing into the evolution of what we are, up through the ignorance into the enlightenment. And again, when we are down in the physical realm, we're in that ignorance. And the more that we become aware of the oneness and our unity, and that we're individualizations and not individuals, the more we see that we are anchored in unity and we're not different and apart, the more we are moving into that state of enlightenment. So as we move up from the ignorance into the enlightenment, where we call it the conscious mind, which we never forget, we teach and rightly is the spiritual mind, because it's the only mind that knows it is a mind. It is going to be hard to accept this because we want the spirit to be way off from anything we can ever reach every day. And isn't that true? Most of our religions of our youth where God was way off in the sky on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, and God was different. God is right here. That within whatever we look and see and touch, if you touch your fingers together, right there, in that is not only the physical realm, but consciousness in the mental realm and the spiritual realm, all manifest within that spot. Spirit is no further than a sleight of eye away from you, a shift of an energetic look, a way of focusing your attention and away from the differences to the unity. That's what enlightenment really is. And all of our spiritual practices are designed to make that shift. And we're thinking we're trying to obtain something that's so far away. It's inside us. It is inside us. Again, encourage you got comments and reactions, to jump down and put those into the comment field. And I'm going to circle back on those in just a moment. Holmes goes on to say that, it is going to be hard to accept this because we want the spirit to weigh off. We will never understand unity until we know that God has passed into everything and is everything and stimulates and animates everything, and through everything is projecting other things for the delight of its own creativity, for the expression of its own imagination, for the gratification of its own will. But of course, this will, this creative imagination, is always constructive, and there's nothing to oppose it. Then he asks, what has this got to do with a theory of nonviolence? What does it have to do with a theory of nonviolence? Well, without reading all of the quotes, I'm going to just jump and tell you what he says. Well, maybe share a few of the words here. The nonviolence of the universe, the non-resistance of the universe, the non-resistance of truth, the nonviolence of that nonviolent and non-resistant principle within us that dominates everything, controls everything, governs everything, but must, because of our nature and what is going through us, leave us alone to discover ourselves. That's what we really truly are called to discover ourselves and our unity. And when we do, we get into a flow. He's calling us to see that when we have energy that we're not expressing, it gets repressed, it gets buried into our subconscious, that it acts out in various ways, including resisting things in the world. That we're called to move into a state of seeing our unity, not to necessarily agree and accept everything that other people are doing, but for us in our own truth to see the unity of who we are, and to move into a state of letting go of the blockages in our life that keep us from being in that flow so the energy can flow through us. He says that ultimately we can take this to we have to get up to the practical side, the psychological side. He calls us to recognize the need to experience the transcendent. That's ultimately what it is. He says the transcendent does not deal with disease because God isn't sick. Read that again of your question, Shay. The transcendence doesn't deal with disease because God isn't sick. The transcendence doesn't deal with impoverishment because God isn't poor. The transcendence does not deal with unifying things because God is unity. We deal with those things. It's in our consciousness and awareness that we're dealing with sickness and poorness and the attempt to unify things. And that's our growth on our evolutionary path, our own spiritual path, is to move into that place of knowing the unity, knowing our wholeness, knowing the prosperity and abundance of our lives. He says we deal with these things, and while we deal with them on their own level, we merely hold that level in place and create 10,000 more devils, and seeing it and experience it and say it in the will of God, whom the Lord loves, he chastises. That's stupid, he says. What fools we mortals are, quoting Shakespeare. He goes on to say that what we have to do is to be up here at the top. Up here. We have to get up here to the spiritual realm and to know our truth. And then we can take it to the practical side. We deal with the transcendence applied to the needs of life when we need it, where we need it, while we need it, and whatever it may be. There's nothing wrong with being happy and well. There's nothing wrong with having abundance and enjoying life. There's nothing wrong in loving and being loved, because we believe God is love. He goes on from there, but I see that we're running out of time. So I'm going to see if there's any comments, questions, any reactions from anyone, and also maybe give you just a quick summary of what a point that I'm trying to get across here. And I will mention that if you like the works and teachings of my work, you could go and check out my website. It's consciousbridge.com. There you'll find my blogs and posts, the links to my YouTube channel, my YouTube videos. I would also encourage you to, if you enjoy the programming here on the New Thought Media Network, to be sure to donate to the New Thought Media program. There's more info on the YouTube channel beneath the video that you can find today. And I encourage you to also to pick up a copy of the Ernest Holmes at Asilomar book, which is available on Amazon and all your finest book sellers. So, what is it? What is the key point, the key takeaway for us? Non-resistance, as we see it and focus on it with Gandhi and King and others, often focuses on non-resistance of us resisting things in the physical realm, us in our own choices as a spiritual being moving through this human experience, pushing against things in the world of form. The political divisiveness in our nation is a perfect example, as I mentioned previously. But whatever is going on in your life, whether it's illness or conflict with another person, what is it you're resisting? You need to identify that, because what you're resisting is growing in your life. Now, yes, have a healthy boundary. You don't have to spend time in arguments with others. You don't have to spend time on focusing on things that keep you focused on separation and divisiveness. But more than that, that non-resistance is an attempt to move you into seeing that there's an energy flowing through you, an energy that's flowing from spirit down and through you and moving it back to spirit, that's doing a couple of things. It's calling you to express your talents and abilities. It's causing you to be the highest expression of who you can be. It's causing you to move through this physical experience and experience it for the delight of the divine, for the divine of spirit. It's causing you to evolve back to spirit in your awareness by knowing your truth of the oneness of all it is, that you're an individualized expression of the one, not a separate individual apart from each other. You and I are one. When we create that darshan experience in our communications that Holmes was talking about, that's evidence of the fact that when I mention something and it awakens something in you, and you mention something and it awakens something in me, that we are communicating. It's God talking to God, and God opening God's other expressions of the one up to the realizations of who they are and remembering of their truth. There is a flow that is occurring continuously. And when we can get into that Tao, the flow, the way, the process of spirit's expression, when we can get out of resisting the divisiveness we see in the physical form, when we get out of resisting the things that we see are separate and apart in the physical realm, we can move into a state that allows us to be in the flow, where there is an energetic flow from spirit and through us and back to spirit. And when we can do that, that is what Holmes called harmony. And we mentioned that the word harmony and happiness from Gandhi earlier. Gandhi said happiness is moving into that state of flow as well. So I hope this has been beneficial for you. If so, I just want to thank you for joining us for the conversation today. I feel like I've talked a lot, but hopefully those of you who were on the presentation benefited from this program, and you got something from it. And I hope you join us next week when we have another wonderful conversation on our rotating speakers on this, series, that there will be someone else with you next week who will take you on another topic. If you watch this on the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and a like, and share it with others who maybe they might benefit from hearing of these concepts of non-resistance and how it can apply in their life. Thanks for being with us today, and we'll see you next time. Take care.